There's a quiet revolution that's reshaping our entire world. And no, it's not about politics or some new technology. It's about demographics. You've probably heard it called the silver tsunami, this massive global trend of aging populations. So today we're going to break down exactly what that means for all of us, for our money, our families, and really, our future.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll define what this graying wave actually is. Then, we'll dig into why it's even happening. After that, we'll get into the tough stuff, the economic and social squeeze it's creating. And finally, we'll look at how we might just be able to navigate our way through it all.
All right, let's dive right in. Section 1, the world's graying wave. What do we actually mean when we say the world is, well, getting older?
So, an aging population isn't just about more people living to be 100. The really critical piece here is the ratio. It's all about having a growing chunk of older folks compared to the number of younger people. This imbalance, this fundamental shift, is what's shaking up the entire structure of our societies.
And, this shift isn't just happening randomly. It's actually a pretty predictable stage in a country's development. Experts call it the demographic transition model. In wealthier nations, what happens is both birth rates and death rates fall, and that classic population pyramid starts to get really top-heavy.
So, that's the what. Now, let's get into the why. This massive global change is really being powered by two surprisingly simple forces that are, quite literally, changing our world.
It really just boils down to these two things happening at the exact same time. On one hand, we're having way fewer children, and on the other, we're living longer and longer lives. It's this powerful 1-2 punch. The bottom of that population pyramid is shrinking, while the top is getting wider.
So, why are birth rates dropping? Well, believe it or not, it's mostly a story of progress. As women get more access to education and jobs, and as contraception becomes widely available, family sizes just naturally get smaller. In a lot of developed countries, the fertility rate has actually fallen below the replacement level. That's about 2.1 children per woman, which means the population isn't even naturally replacing itself anymore.
Now, for the other side of the coin, which is honestly one of modern civilization's greatest achievements, we are living much, much longer. Thanks to incredible medical breakthroughs, better public health, and improved nutrition, death rates have just plummeted. It's a huge win for humanity. But when you have fewer births and longer lives happening at the same time, well, that's the recipe for an aging world.
But of course, these incredible successes create a whole new set of challenges. And that brings us to the economic squeeze. This reality where fewer and fewer workers are left to support a growing number of dependents.
This really is the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? When that demographic balance gets so out of whack, the entire economic foundation of a society gets put to the test. Who's going to pay for pensions? Who funds healthcare? And who's going to do all the work?
Economists have a name for this, the dependency ratio. But forget the jargon. Just think of it like a seesaw. On one side, you have all the working-age people paying taxes and keeping the economy going. And on the other side, you have the dependents, kids, and more retirees. Now, in a place like Japan, there are fewer than 2 workers for every 1 retiree. Compare that to Nigeria, where there are about 15 workers for every 1 retiree. You can just picture how differently balanced those two seesaws are.
And as you can imagine, a tilted seesaw like that creates some huge problems. First off, you get labor shortages because there just aren't enough young people to fill jobs. That, in turn, leads to slower economic growth. Then, you've got a massive crisis for pension systems, which were built on the idea of a ton of workers paying for a few retirees. And finally, healthcare costs absolutely skyrocket to meet the needs of an older population.
And this really puts it all into perspective. Think about it. Systems like Social Security were created way back in 1935, when people just didn't live that long. They were never, ever designed to support someone for 20 or even 30 years in retirement. The fundamental math that these programs are built on is starting to break down.
But this isn't just about dollars and cents. An aging population is creating a whole new social order. It's changing everything, from who holds power in politics to the very way our families are structured.
This brings us to a concept called gray power, and it is a very real thing. Just look at the data. Older citizens are by far the most reliable voters. So as they become a larger slice of the population, their political power just skyrockets, and what matters to them suddenly starts to matter most to politicians.
So what do older voters typically care about? Well, no big surprise, they want to protect things like Social Security and make sure healthcare is well funded.
And since many are on fixed incomes, they often aren't huge fans of tax increases. This voting power directly shapes a nation's budget, sometimes at the expense of other things, like spending on education or new infrastructure.
And this demographic shift is hitting us right at home, too. The whole idea of the traditional multi-generational household, where grandparents, parents, and kids all live together, is becoming way less common. Today, families are smaller and more spread out. So caring for our elders is gone from being a family duty to something that's often a professional service, and that creates all new financial and emotional burdens.
Okay, so that's a lot of pretty heavy challenges. It can all sound pretty daunting. So the big question is, what on earth do we do about it? In our last section, let's explore some of the strategies that governments are looking at to navigate this new era.
When you look at the options, policymakers basically have a toolkit with 4 main tools. First, they can promote immigration to bring in fresh, working-age people. Second, they can raise the retirement age so people work and pay taxes for longer. Third, they can try what are called pro-natalist policies, basically giving people incentives to have more kids. And fourth, they can try to get more of their existing population into the workforce. As you can probably guess, none of these are easy or simple fixes.
And that really brings us to a final, much more personal question. If you step back from all the policy and the economics, this trend forces every single one of us to think differently. If living to be 100 starts to become the new normal, how do we redefine what a full life even is? What does that mean for our careers, our education, our families, our purpose? That's not just a challenge for governments to solve. It's a question for every single one of us.